Is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. Going to start off right from the beginning. Angry, and the kind of anger that I had forgotten. You know, I was having a conversation with my kids over the weekend, and I remembered, as we were going through all of the protests and all of the stuff coming out of this administration and all of the frustration and everything that's built to this moment, to this head. I remember the anger of being, 16, 17. I remember the angst. I remember the frustration, heart of the Reagan administration, heart of the kind of authoritarian mindset that you see playing out. And, the thing that gets me is we're in this weird kind of moment where the moneyed interests continue to win and the rest of us not, and to varying degrees. The sad reality is the folks in the streets right now, they're the folks at the bottom who are taking the worst battering. But all along the political spectrum, all along the socioeconomic ladder, people are just getting pummeled. And, I look at this, and it really started out of what happened over the weekend in Philadelphia at Hahnemann Hospital. In fact, I think it's going to be a couple of days from either tomorrow or a couple of days, the year anniversary of the closing of Hahnemann Hospital by this hedge fund guy, who evidently, wants to turn it into luxury condos. And what does a community need more than luxury condos? Well, I would argue a hospital, and a hospital that serves the underserved, which is what Hahnemann was. And over the weekend, you had a rally of people who marched to City Hall, and then they marched to Hahnemann Hospital to set up like pop-up tents and, nurses and doctors and people to give care to the community that's for this last year has been completely underserved. And what you had was, the police showing up in their riot gear, threatening violence if the people didn't move. And look, nurses and doctors, they don't want to get pummeled. They're used to cleaning up after the pummeling. And it sent me into this mental kind of rage, because we're in a moment where the country is in a healthcare crisis. We're in a moment where this pandemic, it ain't going away. As much as Trump and Pence and the powers to be want us to believe that it's going to go away magically with sunshine and Clorox and light up your behind, it ain't. And, for all the people, it's just a big hoax, it's nothing. It's something. Which is why I was happy today to see the Democrats finally growing a spine and moving forward on a bill to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, or the dreaded Obamacare. Trust me, it'll die in the Senate. It isn't going anywhere, because the Trump GOP hates the working class. They hate the toiling class. They hate us. And, I came back to this just visceral anger of the stupidity, the dangerous stupidity of our leadership. And, over the weekend, I kept hearing all of these things that Trump had said and Pence had said about, it's just 3 or 4% of the counties, just a handful of counties across, not a big deal, except the fact is those handful of counties where 1 in 5 Americans live. I know, it's only a couple of counties. Yeah, it's the big ones. Officially, we've hit as a globe 10 million people with the virus, over 500,000 dead, almost 130,000 of them right here. In fact, the U.S. accounts for more than a quarter of them. I mean, it's angering and it's frustrating and it's all of this stuff. And the other part is while the leadership is grossly incompetent and dangerously stupid, half of our general population is right there with them. The number of people that I've heard, in my day-to-day travels saying this is all stupid and wearing a mask is ignorant and this is not going to help anything and it's all a hoax anyway. And it's like they're not paying attention to the fact that Kansas, their governor just ordered people to wear masks in public. Arizona just shut down all the bars, movie theaters, gyms, water parks, all of that. Nevada, Texas, huge, they're undoing the reopening. Florida, Jacksonville, for instance, where the Republicans are moving their convention because they all want to be there in person. No masks, of course. The mayor of Jacksonville just issued a requirement that you have to wear a mask indoors and outdoors. You see the fact that Los Angeles County, one of the biggest counties in the country, massive, what the news was, alarming increase. In fact, they say by the middle of July, they're going to run out of hospital beds. And, for all those idiots who are, it's just a hoax, blah, 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 blah. You're making it worse. This whole southern tour of the pandemic could have been avoided if those idiot doofuses would have suffered like the rest of us instead of flipping their nose at us and going, it's all a big hoax. And then the stupid people from the north rushing down, and they're going to bring it back. I was listening to the radio today. One of the big music DJs was saying, we're planning our vacation, and we're going to go to Ocean City, Maryland, and we're going to go to the beach because they're reopening the this and the that. And I'm going, really? Is this the best message you should be spending? And the answer is people are just, a good portion of them, just freaking stupid. But I digress. It comes back to leadership. It comes back to the people that we put into elected office. And unfortunately, I live in a state where our governor, for all of the arrows that he took, all of the attacks and the people, I hate Governor Wolf and all of that, he did the right thing. Because Pennsylvania is one of the states that's still flat. We haven't seen a surge yet. Yet, I say. Because we're just as stupid as everybody else. Now, here's the worst part. We find out now that there's possibly a mutation of this virus or another type virus coming out of China. Something that I haven't really gotten my mind around just yet. But there's another wave. And we haven't gotten through this wave yet. So it got me into, and I'm just angry and frustrated. And I understand the frustration and the anger of the people in the streets because we're not going to learn. And the worst part of it is the rich keep getting richer because out of this pandemic, and we talked about this before, our billionaire class, they pocketed an additional $500 billion. They're doing better than ever. And in fact, the giant $500 billion trough that we set aside for them, I'm sure once the numbers come out, they will have filled themselves, they will have gorged themselves on that trough, and it's not going to go to the people who needed it. Millions of people are going to end up bankrupt. Small businesses are screwed, and I fear to think about how many people are going to lose their homes. All because we have a president who's truly a doofus. And now we see the story come out. And I've been waiting for this. Gilead Science, they're a pharmaceutical company. They're the ones who had supposedly the miracle drug, this remdesivir, I think is how you pronounce it. This is supposed to be the cure. It's supposed to be very, very promising. The problem is it will be $500, $520 per dose. So for what they're saying is the typical treatment, it's going to cost you $3,120 for a drug that, get this, and this is, again, how freaking stupid are we, that we, the American people, handed $70 million over to develop this damn drug. So not only did we pay to develop the damn thing, we're going to pay to fatten the profits. So if that doesn't make you angry, if that doesn't make you want to take to the streets and scream and holler and carry on, if that isn't enough, we find out over the weekend that our traitorous, arrogant moron of a president ignored the targeting of our troops by a Russian spy unit. And his defense is, well, I wasn't briefed on it. And the defense, and I love this. He tweets out that it wasn't credible. It wasn't credible. So I wasn't briefed on it. So let me ask you, how did you know it wasn't credible if you weren't briefed on it? Now, we do know he was briefed on it back in March. Somebody told him about it. But any defense for this idiot doofus? Anything? Or is it worse than even I think? A lot of people saying, "Oh, he's Putin's puppet." And it's even worse than that. They're in it together. They simply want to, buy and sell the U.S. and a little far for me, but damn, man, when you see what this guy is doing on every front, and he claims no one's ever been tougher on Russia than me. Really? Not a peep. The report is, and there's some backing up of it, that this Russian spy unit offered the Taliban money to target coalition forces, U.S. troops. And we knew about this about a year ago. And some of the stories have, there's a bunch of stories and a bunch of now backpedaling, because look, even Republicans now, even some of Trump's biggest apologists are going, hey, we need to know what you knew and when you knew it. This is actually serious. This could cost us something. This could get those knuckle-dragging mouth breathers to actually pay attention. The ones who won't wear their masks. This might actually get them to, wait a second, this ain't right. This might be the moment where people turn on Trump. Because look, for all the talk of Russians are going to be our friend, they're not. They're never going to be our friends. It's not going to happen. Vladimir Putin will never allow that to happen. Maybe some leader down the road. I've got nothing against the Russian people. Their leadership, sorry, lots of problems there. Now, the one argument that I saw that, the part of me goes, makes sense, goes like this. And this, you go back to inauguration time. We were talking about this during the inauguration period, that the intelligence community, who Trump was already belittling and marginalizing and ridiculing, wouldn't tell him stuff because he can't keep his mouth shut, and that he would blab whatever. And look, the sad reality is we don't know what he's saying to world leaders. We don't know what kind of back deals he's made, because there's no oversight. A lot of the calls from what the reports are him alone. And no one's more unprepared than he is. And that's virtually everybody that's come out of this administration saying that. But the argument is that nobody told him, and this is going to be his defense. Nobody told me because the intelligence community doesn't trust me, because he can't keep his mouth shut. Now, there is maybe some validity to that argument. Maybe these senior U.S. officials who are in charge of all this stuff keep this stuff from him because he's a moron and he can't understand it. And the thing is he hasn't gotten any better at it. He's just gotten more arrogant. And this week we're supposed to have John Bolton come on the program, and the former national security advisor and UN ambassador. Talk a little bit about his book. I think that's Thursday. I've got that scheduled for. But he's going to tell probably the same story, which is this guy is horribly underprepared, thinks that he can either charm somebody or jawbone them or bully them into doing what he wants. And most of the time, he gets steamrolled because he's an idiot. But you still have the people running around, I love Trump, because it's a sign of protest. And sadly, where my mind has gone with this, and thinking about the anger that I feel, they feel anger too. And Trump gives them that ability to be angry at somebody. And it's all the wrong people. They should be angry at Trump. They should be angry at the wealth class of this country. But it's easier to blame poor people. It's easy to blame minorities. Sad stuff. I'd love to hear your thoughts, though. Am I off base? Should I not be angry about the kind of stuff we're seeing? The numbers are skyrocketing. This was supposed to be the period where the virus went away. It was supposed to be zero by now. And yet it's spiking, and we haven't even hit the worst period. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Scott Dorkin is going to be here to share some thoughts on the Russia story, also the increase in the virus numbers. Quick break, right back. Stick around.
Nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day SWAC leader Philip Murray beat back reports that the Little Steel strike had collapsed. Even as the steel companies were championing that the strike had been broken, Murray insisted that of the 90,000 workers involved, only 20,000 had returned to work in the mills that stretched across 7 states. He added they were mostly supervisors and foremen and not production workers. Murray leveled charges against Ohio Governor Martin Davey that the Ohio National Guard was being used as company police to smash the strike. Strike leaders added that the companies were staging dummy back-to-work parades. In fact, Labor Secretary Perkins had announced that it was the government's effort at mediation that had collapsed. But the steel magnates were on the offensive and had the backing of local politicians and police. George Mike, a union man and disabled veteran, was the latest casualty in the anti-labor war. He was killed the day before at Maltrup Steel in Beaver Falls, Ohio, as picketers clashed with deputy sheriffs. In Indiana, police rushed to plant gates at Inland Steel to guard against new battles as 20,000 strikers prepared for the imminent forced reopenings of Inland Steel and Youngstown Sheet and Tube there. Both mills remained closed for weeks. In Warren, Ohio, police issued a warrant for CIO strike leader Gus Hall and 2 other strike leaders on charges that he was the brains behind a terrorist plot to blow up strike-bound steel mills. And at Bethlehem's Cambria Works in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, 2 separate dynamitings destroyed main water supplies, causing an immediate end to an attempted back-to-work movement there. The strike was far from over. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Joe Biden had a statement today on Donald Trump, basically ignoring that a Russian spy unit was offering bounties on U.S. soldiers. Biden said his entire presidency has been a gift to Putin, but this is beyond the pale. He says it's a betrayal of the most sacred duty we bear as a nation to protect and equip our troops when we send them into harm's way. It's a betrayal of every single American family with a loved one serving in Afghanistan or anywhere overseas. And I agree. You know, the fact that he has done nothing on this isn't surprising to me at all. It isn't surprising that his initial response is to, I didn't know, no one told me. And then to, well, it wasn't credible. And then I'm sure it'll come down to, it's all fake news. I'm sure that's what we're going. I'm here to share some thoughts on this breaking news. I've asked our good friend Scott Dworkin to come talk with us. Scott is the co-founder of the Democratic Coalition, also the host of the Dworkin Report. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, how are you?
I'm angry. And as I started today off with, I'm angry about a lot of this stuff, and this one front and center. How is it that you, as president of these United States, could not respond to this in any way, shape, or form?
You're talking about which bit of news are you talking about specifically? You're talking about the murder for hire that Putin administered against the United States of America and our troops and was successful in?
We can start there.
Okay. He knew immediately. He was told immediately. He was briefed immediately. Trump, there's no doubt whatsoever from me and every intelligence person that I know that he was briefed. He knew. And then one of the rules in the White House is anything Russia related, he's told immediately. And if not, you're fired. Like there's a zero tolerance with that. He doesn't put up, that's the one country where he wants to know everything and anything that's going on there. I would almost guarantee that somehow they relayed to Putin the fact that, I mean, I don't know how far it goes, but he did release sensitive military information about, I think, the Israelis' undercover operation when he was in the Oval Office and the Russian government was there. Another act of treason. So it's just a long line in the saga of Donald Trump and, how there's no line. It doesn't matter if you kill American soldiers, he'll still promote you. He'll still talk to you. I've got a few questions for him. I want to know how much of a cut he got of these bounties. I want to know not when he knew, because he knew. I want to know why he didn't do anything. And then let's say that he didn't know. Let's just even say that he didn't know about it. He knew this weekend.
Right.
An immediate, forceful response and not letting Russia get their story straight and then meeting with only Republican members of Congress today to brief them. That's really just getting a story straight on the cover-up and trying to cover up the murder of a U.S. troop in Afghanistan that was paid for by our greatest enemy in Russia. And then also UK troops also being targeted, and I believe other European countries.
Right. So let me ask you, since you're giving him the benefit of the doubt, because as I said a minute ago, no, we're just following this line of thought.
100% sure that he was told and he knew.
You said that right from the start, but just to follow the line as a thought, because
Sure.
I said 3.5 years ago that the intelligence community would hold things from him because he can't keep his mouth shut. So you don't believe at any way, shape, or form the intelligence community held this from him, because the report that I saw says they've known for about a year that this was going on. So you don't think there's any way he didn't know?
Right, and it was just proven that in the spring it was in his intelligence document, his daily briefing document. And
he doesn't read those things, Scott.
Well, then that's his fault. And there's very little sympathy I have for people who don't do their job. And in the line of fire, when our soldiers die, if you're not upset about it, then something's wrong with you. I've known the depth and scope of how he's had an allegiance to Russia over the United States of America in every way. And this just exposes the fact that he is the biggest traitor in the history of the United States of America. By far, there is no close second. The second place would, honestly, it's like a tie between Pence and McConnell, probably goes to Moscow Mitch. He may actually be, in the long run, Moscow, Mitch, may be the one who goes down more infamous than even Trump, because he's the one.
He's the enabler.
He kept him in office.
Yeah, he's the enabler. But here's the thing, and this is another one of those moments where, we've been watching this play out, for the last 3.5 years. Trump has been just brutal to our allies, and basically bending over backwards to appease our adversaries, and Putin being the star among them. This is one of those moments where you have to ask the question: when does the Republican Party find its soul, find its backbone, find its heart, find whatever, find the flag they love to wave in our face? When do they wake up to this?
What Republican Party? The Republican Party that waves around the Confederate flag, the flag of treason? The Republican Party that talks about how we're friends with Russia when they're murdering our troops? You know what I mean? Like, this is not a party. This is a cult. This is a cult, and it's a criminal conspiracy against the United States of America at this point. It always has been. It always will be. A lot of people are going to prison for this, and I'm not, again, like the Russia scandal, like I said there, a lot of people are going to prison. You have even Roger Stone's, he was just told today that a federal judge told him that he has to report to prison 15 days from now. So like everything is kind of coming together, but at the end of the day, there is just one truth here, is that at least one American soldier died because the Russian government, Putin specifically, asked or offered up money to murder U.S. soldiers, and then paid for that murder, which means that he has information and pictures and videos of probably the U.S. troop being murdered that they can use as propaganda, which they'll probably release to shame Trump into a corner. Like, I don't think he's prepared for what the damage that this can do to the United States of America on just the propaganda level, and how bad they can just eviscerate him for this. And he's gotten played. Putin's ate his lunch every time that he's been out. In the same time, you have Iran, who was working with Interpol to issue a warrant for Trump's arrest. And you got to wonder, I mean, if Putin didn't want that to happen, that wouldn't happen. So then, like, why is he letting that happen? And
so let me ask you the other side of this, because we agree, Trump is basically Putin's puppet, but isn't this one of these moments where this is a bridge too far, maybe for the American people, and that this is something that costs Trump the election and Putin his puppet? I mean, at some point, is this not the response?
No, I think that we'll have to fall into a depression and hit probably 200,000 COVID deaths. And for there to be, governors start to be removed from office for their indifference and negligence and fraud and cover up in regards to the COVID cases. I mean, there's so many crimes being committed right now. They don't even realize that they're crimes. I mean, there's people at the White House right now working on a cover-up strategy for the Russian murder plot. And so you're thinking, like, I just want to advise those people, if you work in the White House, you better find a lawyer, because we're coming for you in a legal way. And it's not a retaliatory measure, because I'll tell you, friends of mine like Nate Nesbitt and Rick Wilson and Sherry Jacobus, people who are Republicans that kind of stand out from the mix, we're working together. And, there's a bipartisan appeal. And I'll tell you what, I've never, in the past 20 years of me working in politics, I've never been this, we've never been this organized, and we've never had this much bipartisan support against him. And also with independents and just normal Americans who wanted to jump in because they're at home. I don't think, like I've always said, we're going to sprint through the finish no matter what, and we're going to act like we're behind the entire time. Because polls don't vote. But if we all vote, there is one certainty. If we all vote, he loses. He loses, and, there's a very, very real chance that we not only take back the Senate, but, we could we could really hit some of these gubernatorial races and local races really hard. And it's not again, it's America or Trump. It's not, there's two sides here that's good and evil, and the good side is the side that Biden and Obama are on, and Trump is on the other side. Trump is on the virus's side.
Yeah, and look, you brought up the virus. It's raging across the southern part of the country. What we get out of this administration is, well, it's just 3 or 4% of the counties. Now, granted, they're the most populous counties in the country, account for about 20% of the total population of this country, but it's just a small number of counties.
Right. Well, we don't know the extensive, testing hasn't been done. We need testing at a level where if you go to work, you get tested before you go into the door. We need instant testing like Trump has, where he gets it in 5 or 10 minutes. We need to be tested almost multiple times a day. And there's zero testing infrastructure in a national level. So the numbers we have are false. It's a fraud.
But we can't afford to have that kind of testing, given our structure. I mean, did you see this story coming up from this Gilead Sciences? The people who are making this, what is it, Remdesivir or something? Supposedly the miracle drug. They're charging $520 a pill, man. We gave them $70 million to develop it, and they're going to sell it back to us for $520 a pill.
Yeah, and I guess it's going to be thousands of dollars for people with private insurance, even to get the therapy for it, or however it works. And what's really sad is in the grand scheme of things, that's not that expensive in the healthcare industry. And it's just this is all exposing something that is so disgusting. If there's a cure, you shouldn't have to pay for it. Why are we paying taxes? What are you doing with our money? You're stealing with it. You're stealing it and you're giving it to corporations instead of the people. It's our money. It's not his money to dole out. He acts like I gave this grant. No, you didn't. You didn't do anything. You haven't done anything. All we've done is terrible. Sorry.
This is the moment. Look, this is the moment to be angry. This is the moment to be slamming your fist on the table and using all the words that the FCC won't let me use. Which again is why I took Friday. I took Friday because I couldn't do it. All of the news that came out Friday, I just, you know what? I can't do it. I will get an FCC fine. I know it, because every other word out of my mouth was something in a profane fashion. I just had to step away.
I'm ready. Go time. I'm going to have an even-keeled hand no matter what he does. And I'm going to keep on pushing forward every single day, working my tail off in every single way that I can, in coordination, obviously, with our group, the Democratic Coalition, and pushing forward is really, we made it this far. We can make it through 130 or so odd days.
127.
27. I lost track. I forgot about the weekend. Also, not sure that weekends matter anymore. They're just days.
They're just work days. So the question then becomes, because look, they're doing everything that they can possibly do to make sure that people don't have the opportunity to vote. Here in Pennsylvania, for instance, today the Trump campaign suing the state of Pennsylvania to stop the mail-in ballot drop-off points. They want to make it as hard as possible to allow people to vote, because again, and the weird thing is mail-in voting is one of those things that no one's really decided who does better off. There isn't one side who claims that this is great for us. It's just people have access to the ballot. So I don't even understand why he would want to stop it, other than, his base are the ones who walk around without a mask and don't care if they get sick or get other people sick. So they'd be happy to show up to the polls. And there are those of us like me who, for the second time in my life, did a mail-in ballot, who said, it's probably a little safer.
If we're fighting for that, we're not fighting what we need to be fighting for. And so that's the whole aim. That's why he makes deals with humanity, where he's willing to sacrifice human life in exchange for money. There really is no word for it, but I would assume that, next to the word treason, I don't have a good word for everything that's been going on. But it's tough. I have dozens of people I know that have symptoms. Some tested positive and some died. And some went to the ER, this weekend. The worst is yet to come. And I can't say this enough. Like, we will never reopen if everybody's not wearing a mask at all times outside. That we will never, it will never happen. And if you care about this country, you have to wear a mask. There's no excuse. I've talked to doctors all across the country. I know people with anxiety disorders and all that. That means you can't go outside. That's what that means. It doesn't mean you can go outside without a mask.
And what about one of those little cards that exempts you from wearing a mask?
They're false. Those are made up, doctored, fake little ID cards that don't really exist. And there won't be. We'll be fighting against any kind of exemption unless like there's going to be weird things like, there's some people who wear a different kind of mask, like an oxygen mask. And so I've seen people, but like at the same time, it's probably tough for you to get around. But if you have to go to like CVS or something, you see what I'm saying? Like
right.
There will be rare instances, but you're going to be able to tell, or there's got to be some kind of system. But for now, like everyone's gonna slap it on, and if you're not, like, you got to be fined, or like at the very least.
No, for at least a short period of time. At least, like I've been saying here in Pennsylvania, because right now we're one of the states that's kind of flattened off. There's some hope for us.
Right.
We've been talking about for the last, I've been telling my kids this for the last couple of months. While we were sheltering in place and struggling. And then we hear, friends are, traveling throughout the South and having a high old time. And I'm saying, it's going to spike. And here we are at this moment where it's spiking, where we now find out Kansas is, the governor of Kansas has issued a mask order. I think it's Arizona shut down all the bars and gyms and everything because their numbers have gone through the roof. Even in Florida, the mayor of Jacksonville said everyone now is going to have to wear a mask outside and in, which means where the Republicans moved their convention, going to have to wear the damn mask after all.
Yeah, I don't think that, if you're anti-mask, you're anti-reopening. If you want to reopen, then you're a big supporter of masks. And so there's no other side to that. It has nothing to do with your First Amendment. Our right to live is more important than your right to not wear a mask, because you have no right to not wear a mask. Think of your mask and its filter as pants and underwear. You don't have to, maybe some people won't put a filter in there. Some people don't wear underwear. Everybody's got to wear some kind of pants. You can't be just nude on the bottoms. And so for the betterment of everybody, you're going to have to wear it. If not, then, you should not be exposing your face at all. I try to tell people that this thing spreads so easily. If someone's standing in the same space for a few minutes and you go into that same space, like, if they have it, you can get it. Yeah. It's very simple. And so I don't know with these pool parties and everybody, like, this is stupidity at a level that we're going to be the example of what never to do during a pandemic. And we already have paid dearly, but we're talking about an epidemiologist, one of the world's leading epidemiologists, the guy who blew the whistle in like January. So from Harvard, he told me that, if we stay in this route, there will be 1 million Americans that die, and almost every American will have it. And outside of that, the 1 million Americans that die are directly from coronavirus, and not from the millions of people who will die because they can't get an ambulance, can't get into a hospital. I don't think people understand the snowball here. And I think the mythological of like 2 weeks, if I'm not sick within 2 weeks, that's not the case at all. It can stay in your system for a while, and, you can be asymptomatic and just have like a little cold or running cough. Like, it's different for everybody. And so again, if we don't know, we have it. If we don't have testing available everywhere, if we don't wear masks while we have no vaccine, which we may never have a vaccine. But imagine this, if we had testing at home, if we had testing, everybody has a test kit at home, you can go see your family because you can test yourself before you leave. You go in the car, you go straight to grandma, grandpa's or whatever. They tested themselves, they know. All of a sudden your bubble expands, and you can't do it without testing. Like you don't want to risk that, because if you're asymptomatic and you have it, you can definitely kill somebody.
Yeah.
And
what do you say to the person, Scott, who says that the tests are only 45 to 50% accurate?
Bleep you. No, I'd say that is that their reason for not getting a test?
Well, I mean, that's of course a rationale for not. Well, what's the point? It's not gonna be accurate. The same thing with the masks. It's not 100% foolproof.
Right. I mean, I'd say that it avoids a second wave. It's the only way to avoid a second wave.
Yeah.
Right now, we're in the second part of the first wave. And again, the World Health Organization and the CDC have both said the worst is yet to come. CDC admitted the other day that over 20 million Americans have had it. By the end of the year, 50 to 70 million Americans should have had it. And of that, I mean, these numbers are terrible. It's not the flu. This propaganda kills, and it's Trump propaganda that actually is killing Americans. And his indifference, his negligence, his fraud, and his constant lying and misdirection, and no cohesive strategy, no plan. It makes you wonder. It really makes you wonder, at what point is he actually really trying to murder Americans? And I'm not joking. I'm being serious. We're looking into it because I don't know why you would be this stupid. Like I just don't.
Well, other than you're just that stupid. I mean, and you're not affected by it.
He's not a complete. He gets it. He just doesn't want to do it because he's a sociopath and he wants that control, and he loves seeing people die. Like that. There's no doubt about that.
So you can't give him he wants the economy to open up, so he has his talking point for re-election. And it's not the evil kind of thing that you're pointing out. It's just, hey, he needs the economy to open up.
Yeah, if he needs it to open up, then everybody needs to wear a mask. Or if we don't wear a mask, then one case at one restaurant will shut that restaurant down forever. One case, okay? It's going to be lawsuit after lawsuit from families. I mean, Fox News already lawyered up because they know that they committed fraud, widespread. Like and they downplayed the virus. I mean, a lot of these people, if they don't think we're going to look back and remember who was on what side for this, like everything is etched in stone here. We're basically got hit by a nuclear bomb, and we're still see whatever it would be, the cloud, the smoke, whatever it is, the remnants of it. So we haven't even been able to really cater to the situation. And so once we do, who do you think the state reps and state senators are going to blame? They're going to blame the governors. Who do you think the members of Congress are going to blame? They're going to blame the White House. Who do you think the governors and senators are going to blame? You can't blame anybody else. And if you blame Democrats, I recommend that you don't do that, because you don't want our eyes to be focused on you. Ask Susan Collins, ask Moscow Mitch, ask Leningrad Lidzy, ask Disappointment DeSantis, ask Abbott. I'll just do Abbott because Abbott's just terrible.
Well, there's an A word that goes with that, but I can't say that.
Skip it.
Again, the FCC. But back to your pants analogy. I don't care if people wear pants or not. I'll just wear the mask.
Yeah, I mean, both. But I get what you're saying. I mean, I will say the mask is the most important article of clothing. Like it really is what helps us. I don't know how else to say it except for the fact that we don't know anything about the virus. It's spreading like a wildfire. And if you want to be part of the problem, don't wear a mask. If you want to step up and be a person with love and compassion, if you love anybody, if you love any person in the world, including yourself, your dog, think about animals that you love. Do you take care of yourself? Do you care about other people at all? Why is it cool to not care about people? Why is it cool to kill people?
Because we're a society, Scott, that only cares about ourselves. We've been told since basically my whole life that it's all about me. We're hyper individuals and pull myself up and deal for myself and the hell with everybody else. Greed is good. The one who dies with the most toys wins. All that stuff.
The grand opportunity for us here is to create the most progressive nation in the world based off of this, and the building blocks for it are there. And the destruction of a lot of companies, and also, I think that mask wearing is maybe it'll make us a better society. We'll worry less about how we look. We'll worry less about, what if we're getting to an exclusive party. We're more focused on family. I think there's going to be a lot of positive things that come out of this. But again, the worst is yet to come. So I just want to make sure that people brace themselves, because I don't know what happens when this keeps on spreading through rural communities. There will be states that probably break down, and we'll have to hand it over to the federal government. I don't know how far it'll go, but they're definitely they are bordering on chaos. And I don't know. I will say that there is some chatter of some Republicans that are already trying to push for resignations in Texas, Arizona, and Florida.
Yeah. Well, here, hold on. Dick freaking Cheney, Darth Vader himself. Darth Cheney donned a mask and tweeted it out. So if Darth Cheney is putting a mask under his mask, there you go.
And his daughter tweeted about how she had a lot of questions about the Russia report, questions that Trump will never forgive her for. And it's which makes me think, okay, Cheney obviously confirmed it independently, and this is far-reaching. It all comes together in one little bow. Eventually, it'll all make sense. The point of Trump's presidency is for him to take as much money as he can.
The kleptocracy.
Whether or not people die, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Let's finish up on masksnow.org, the website, to find out how to help get masks out to people. Learn to sew. If you can't sew, learn to do something else. Hashtag masks now. Give me the 30-second elevator.
Sure. We've made over 200,000 masks from over 12,000 volunteers in 50 states, D.C., Puerto Rico, Guam, etc. And we have coordinated with hospitals across the country and the CDC directly, because the PPP effort personal protective equipment did not exist, and no pipeline existed, so we created one. We started creating masks, and instead of it being used by patients, it's being used by medical professionals because they don't have any. So if you'd like to help out in our effort to not only drive people to wear masks, but also to make masks and deliver masks and volunteer around that, visit masknow.org. We really appreciate your help, and you can join the thousands of other people who are doing the wonderful God's work.
There you go. Good stuff. As always, Scott, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Keep resisting, everybody. Keep your heads up.
There you go. Our good friend Scott Dworkin. Make sure you check out his work at the Dworkin Report, also the Democratic Coalition. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day that American folklorist Archie Green was born in Winnipeg, Canada. His father was a Ukrainian refugee who had fought in the 1905 Russian Revolution. As a young boy, his family moved to Los Angeles. There, he enjoyed listening to cowboy songs on the radio. Archie grew up to become a shipwright and a carpenter, but he never forgot those cowboy songs. At the age of 40, he returned to college at the University of Illinois to study labor history. He wanted to learn about the songs and the stories at the heart of the U.S. labor movement. He was interested in what he dubbed labor lore, the folklore of working people. For 7 years, Archie led the effort to get Congress to pass the American Folklife Preservation Act. Finally, in 1976, Congress unanimously supported the act. The act allowed for the founding of the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress. The center helps to collect the stories of the working class. Archie wrote books and essays about workers, including miners, tinsmiths, millwrights, and the Sailors Union of the Pacific. In 2007, he helped to edit the Big Red Songbook. The book includes the lyrics of nearly 200 labor songs. These songs had been included in various editions of the Little Red Songbooks published by the Industrial Workers of the World between 1909 and 1973. Archie Green understood that workers' stories deserved to be remembered and told. He spent 5 decades as a scholar and advocate for these stories. His work has helped to preserve the record of working class life in America for generations to come.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, interesting day in the Supreme Court. Turns out John Roberts is going to be the new Anthony Kennedy. Who knew? I think most people thought he would take that role as the most powerful man in the country, deciding on which way he was going to swing. But here's the thing, I'm not seeing Roberts as having a liberal conversion, so let's not even begin to think about that. Or even, I'm not even going to say he's had any change of heart or epiphany or anything like that. I will say I believe that the cases that are before the court right now, the ones that are coming are you-know-what crazy. The people who are bringing these cases are a lot more extreme, and they're really rushing to get their ideological agenda rammed through. This case from Louisiana on the abortion thing, right there front and center. Because if you go back and you remember, this case was decided. Basically, this case was decided back in 2016. It was a 5-3 ruling on a Texas law that had this doctor mandate in it that the Louisiana law has. Now, interestingly enough, Roberts actually was on the other side of the issue during the Texas case. Now, he claims for different reasons, because there was more to the Texas case than to this Louisiana case. But the Supreme Court today, in a 5-4 decision, basically shot down what the anti-abortion folks were hoping was another cut at the abortion law. They lost again. And it's idiotic right from the start to think that doctors must have admitting privileges within 30 miles of their clinic, and how, because what ends up happening is, especially in these areas where the Catholic Church owns these hospitals, they're never going to give a doctor who works in an abortion clinic admitting rights. They're never going to do it. So basically what you do is you make abortion illegal by making a mandate that doctors have this admitting privilege that, they don't really need, but you're doing it as a backdoor way of killing the whole thing. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court shot it down. So, hey, evangelicals, you feeling duped yet? You should, because the court now ruled also today in the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau case that now evidently our king, the executive branch, they have the right, I guess, to fire at will whoever the head of the CFPB is. As where before you had to be fired for cause, you had to not do your job. I think it was the phrase was inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance in office. The only way that you could be taken out. The court has ruled that the king can fire you at will, which is setting up other questions of other the Federal Reserve and other oversight bodies that we've said I don't know that we really want to have this go with the political winds. Ideological culture war stuff, loss, corporate America, pretty happy. Now, I'm surprised that they didn't go farther with their decision, because one lawyer group that brought this case, they wanted the whole law thrown out, much like they're trying to do with the Affordable Care Act. Since the individual mandate in the Affordable Care Act is zeroed out, the whole law should be unconstitutional. This ruling gives me hope that John Roberts decides that no, the individual mandate can go, but the rest of the law can stay. Because that's basically what he did here. Sure, you can at will fire the head, but we're not throwing the whole thing out. So that's an interesting moment. And finally, this hour, if you've got a 401k, get ready to get screwed over in the worst of ways, because our Department of Labor is coming forth with their new fiduciary rule. Oh boy, this should be fun. Should be fun because while there probably going to be a little bit of nip around the edges to make your financial advisor tell you why they're pushing this junk on you to buy, or why they're putting your money into certain areas, which is a good thing. I wish it was stronger, but what evidently their draft regulation is, and it's called the Improving Investment Advice for Workers and Retirees Exemption, which I'm going, hold on, wait a second. You're improving it, right? But you're exempting? Okay. They filed this with the Office of Management and Budget, OMB. And what I'm expecting to happen, and what I've been reading on this, is that it's going to open 401ks up to, how do you say, much more exotic investment products. Does that sound, silver-tongued enough? When you think exotic, think toxic. Well, when you think, exotic investment tools, think, light shoved up your behind, because you're going to get ripped off. Because Wall Street doesn't want to get a hold of and I'll be honest, I was kind of surprised at the number, $10 trillion 401k market. They really want to get their paws on that so that they can invest in, all kinds of other things. And not just invest, but charge you high fees, high commissions. Oh boy, it's like a Wall Street paradise. The only thing better than Wall Street getting their hands on our crappy 401ks, which are underfunded and for most people non-existent, would be for Wall Street to get their grubbing little hands on Social Security, which still they're working on. But here's the thing, and this is where on this Department of Labor regulation, which again, I'm having a hard time saying the Department of Labor issuing a regulation during the Trump years, especially when you consider that the Labor Secretary, Eugene Scalia, the son of former Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia, he was the lawyer who took to court and fought and destroyed Obama's fiduciary rule. He is now going to replace it. So do you think that, just asking and throwing out a question here, do you think there's going to be anything in this regulation that's actually going to help working people? Do you think there's going to be anything in there that's going to help you keep a little bit more of your 401k? If you do think there is, I've got some swampland that I'm calling beachfront property for you. Maybe we can make a deal, because there's nothing good coming out of Scalia's Department of Labor for workers at all, and especially not this. This is going to be really another piece of the kleptocracy and another way for Wall Street to stick it to working people. And if you think they've screwed up our pension system enough, wait till they get their grubbing hands on this. It's bad enough that every couple of years they crash the economy and our 401ks turn into 200.5s. But wait till they put them into risky stuff, the stuff that only they understand. That That's when the fun will begin. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
While our present president's moral character seems stuck somewhere between boorish and brutish, it's only fair to note that he also has an aesthetic dimension. This surprising side of Trump popped out several days after the Charlottesville attacks by raging white supremacists. In a presidential tweet, he said, "Sad to see the history and culture of our great country being ripped apart." Yes, very sad to see a resurfacing of raw bigotry ripping so viciously into America's historic attempts to create a culture of mutual respect and unity in a nation of extraordinary diversity. E pluribus unum, as our national maxim puts it. Oh, wait, that's not what Donald meant. Rather than criticizing those who are out to rip apart the American culture's big idea of egalitarianism, this was just more babble from the boorish Trump. He was actually advocating the continued presence of statues of Confederate champions of racism, pieces of bronze and granite that publicly celebrate America's shameful period of slavery, secession, and white supremacy. The KKK thugs invaded Charlottesville in violent objection to the city's planned removal of a statue of Robert E. Lee, who led the Southern States War against the USA so they could keep enslaving African Americans. Trump's lament, then, was not about the attack on America's humanitarian ideals, but merely about, quote, the removal of our beautiful statues. Apparently, it never occurred to him that most Americans do not consider those statues either beautiful or ours. Ironically, Robert E. Lee himself opposed erecting Confederate statues across the South. Quote, "I think it wiser not to keep open the sores of war," he said, but instead to obliterate the marks of civil strife. This is Jim Hightower saying, we could use a leader with such wisdom today when bigots feel newly empowered to incite civil strife across our nation.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So some interesting Trump retweeting this weekend. Trump shared the video of a bunch of old white people riding golf carts, screaming racist nonsense. Also, the yuppie Bonnie and Clyde video that was on Twitter. Or would Karen and Biff be better? I'm not sure, because people actually liked Bonnie and Clyde. I'm sure you've seen it. There's the white couple. The guy with the pink shirt and the AR-15, because nothing says manly like a old man with a pink shirt, and his wife taller with the little tiny pea shooter. Such a lovely couple. Mark McCloskey and his 61-year-old wife, Patricia. They said that they were facing an angry mob on their private street, and they feared for their lives. Yet I don't know what they feared, because people were just walking by, and I guess that's what it was. A bunch of black people showed up in their lily white neighborhood and scared the living daylights out of their pink shirts. And here to share some thoughts on, well, where we are and maybe where we go, our good friend Propane Jane. Jane, thanks for taking time for us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me back.
So I've been going around with, Karen and Biff seems good, or yeah. Billy Bob, but I thought Billy Bob was kind of racist, because they're bad white people too. Curious, thoughts on the Karen and Biff?
I mean, Karen and Ken is what I've seen. And I think that works. We had already been calling them Kamikaze Karen and Kamikaze Ken already. Okay. So we already have the hashtags for that already.
Yeah, the Ken, for me, this guy took it further than Ken. I mean, with the pink shirt and the AR-15 and all that, it was just a whole nother level.
I can't remember exactly how the tweeter tweeted it, but they said that Ken with an AR is Karen.
Okay. I'll go with that.
Yeah,
so Karen
it looks better written out, because then you see the capital AR and how that fits into Ken and makes Karen. But, anyway.
But here's the thing, and this is the thing that's really very troublesome, is I don't see that they were in any real. I watched the video, and maybe there was something I missed, because like with all of these videos, there's always something that we missed. Maybe somebody walked on their lawn. I don't know, but any justification for their behavior? And do you think they should have been at least charged with something?
Yeah, I mean, I think they definitely should be charged with something. But again, I think this is bound to happen all over America. We talk about this all the time. And again, when you look at who is most heavily armed in our society right now, it is overwhelmingly white men, married white men in the South, actually. And so the whole drive, the whole motivation underneath this rush to, cling to their guns, and they're coming for our guns, and all of this that we've witnessed over the last 12 years since Obama was president, was very much steeped in centuries-old racist tropes about, property and your things, and they're coming for your white women, and they're coming for your stuff, and blah, 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 blah. And that, has been what sustained this, well-regulated militia, quote-unquote, and the Second Amendment and the NRA and all of this gun ownership. And this is the language. This is what motivates these people: stand your ground, open carry. The idea of a race war, the idea of a slave revolt, that's what made the Second Amendment. It's not, this sort of flowery language. I don't know what people think about the Second Amendment when they think about it, but at the end of the day, it was something that at least people in the South needed to keep their slaves and to put down slave rebellions. And so when they were hashing out the documents of our country, and they were making, amendments, this is a thing that had to be settled between the North and the South. And the South very much needed that and wanted that to maintain slavery. So, again, this is that same idea in the modern day. We're having a big conversation about civil rights and about Black Lives Mattering and about the police brutality, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're talking about the wealth class. We're talking about the haves and the have-nots. We're talking about all of these things that stir up this birth of a nation hysteria and fear in these people. And yes, they are over-exaggerating the threat they're under, the perceived threat that they're under. Nobody's come into their house to break into their house. Why would why would those people do that?
Yeah. No, but for me, in talking about the Second Amendment, and I've talked about this a bunch over the years. I've never seen it put in the frame of, we're going to keep down the slave. I've always seen it put as, in the Federalist Papers as, it was, so that we wouldn't have a standing army, because we were never supposed to have a standing army, because they saw what the British did with it and colonialism and all the stuff that we've now become. But it was about the idea of whipping up an army at a moment's notice in case of foreign attacks. That's what I read in the various Federalist Papers.
Oh, for sure. But if you dig deeper, again, and you dig into the Confederate States of America, and you dig into what they actually needed, and this goes into the Electoral College, too, and the Three-Fifths Compromise, and black people not being able to vote, but the southern states actually having more weight because there were more people. It was more populous. There was more economic activity happening down here because of all of the enslaved people who didn't get a vote. And so, again, there is a disadvantage built into the Electoral College that was tilted towards the slave states.
Right.
And we still don't acknowledge that, and how that affects our elections even. But it also very much affects things like the Second Amendment. It very much affects things like local control of the police department and the sheriff and the constable and all of these, judges and the way the courts stay the way they are. I mean, all of our court systems, you got to think about Reconstruction. And when we talk about the Supreme Court and how these laws are still imperiled, decades after, you know, it felt like this is settled law, it's because these people, they have on the Republican side, they have a very, very firm grasp of how to use that system and use the laws that are actually on the books.
Yep.
That haven't been updated, haven't been amended, or the amendments that are there were still made at a time when this society was not a progressive, egalitarian society. So they still didn't go far enough, and there's still a lot of white supremacy and misogyny and homophobia and all of the isms and xenophobia, you know, just written into that law that's on the books.
Yeah, we're most certainly in an interesting time, and to be honest, I've had some really very bizarre conversations with people who, you know, have now resigned themselves that, you know, they can't stop what's coming, and now the line I get is, well, I just want to be left alone. You know, I'm not responsible for all this bad stuff that's happened. I just want to be left alone. And look, there are a lot of people who, you know, they're just struggling to stay on the treadmill to make it to the next day.
Right.
They don't have time to think about everything else, or so that they've told me.
Right.
You know, the one guy, I'll give you an example. He's like, look, I want to be on the right side of stuff. I just don't have time for it. I didn't do any of this stuff. I try not to do any of this stuff. And he says he feels attacked. And this is one of those moments where, you know, I fear that you lose people when they start to feel attacked. And part of it is, you know, I'm sure you've seen all of the statues and all of the monuments that are coming down.
Yeah.
You know, this guy was particularly upset that someone wants to tear John Wayne's, you know, statue down and take his name off of some airport out in California, which I didn't even know there was a John Wayne airport. When does it stop? It was kind of his response, or does it stop?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think people really need to think long and hard about what it is that's tied up in their own self-identity and these symbols and these celebrities and these you know, figures from history that they've never personally met.
Right. I have none of that.
Yeah.
I think it. I've always believed it should be the post office. It shouldn't be the Ronald Reagan post office, because you'll remember, maybe you will, that as soon as Reagan left office, the Republican establishment slapped his name over on everything. It was no longer National Airport. It was Ronald Reagan Airport. I still call it National Airport.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think it's not so much about naming things after people. It's about understanding that for whatever thing, whatever name something is named, various people based on who they are and what their identity is are going to either identify with that name or they're not going to identify with that name, in a positive or negative way. And so I think that the issue that a lot of white people, frankly, are having right now is that so much of their heritage, so much of their belief system, so much of their identity and their pride and their culture that they've looked upon endearingly and not ever, seen it through this lens of, is this racist, or is this sexist, or is this homophobic, or is this somehow offensive to someone who is not me, this WASP person who all of this stuff has been made for forever.
Right.
And that's the thing where, again, me as a black woman hearing a white man say they feel attacked by marginalized people speaking out about our life experience, that just sounds like more privilege and more like white male supremacy and unexamined, bigotry and fragility. I mean, those are a lot of words just to simply say there's no empathy there.
Right. No,
there's a complete rush to come back to me. I don't want to have to think about this anymore. When again, as a member of this group, as a black person, this isn't something that I ever get to take a break from. And I think that's what's so interesting about this moment is the sort of like propensity to get fatigued, like because I hear what you're saying about people feeling attacked, but there's an element of that that's like a fatigue. Like, I'm tired of hearing about that. Like, okay, we did it for a week, we did it for 2 weeks, or hey, we did it for a full month. But now, shouldn't it be over? Can't we just go back to the way things were, where we weren't making this like a front of the conversation.
And to be honest, I had this conversation with my oldest daughter because she was asking me, all of her coworkers are saying, all these protests are ridiculous and they're not going to accomplish anything. And we had to actually go through and go, no, it's accomplished a lot.
Yeah.
There have been real changes out of this, and that's what usually happens. I mean, when windows start breaking and chaos starts happening, the powers to be start going, how do we put this to rest? And things do get a little bit better. Hopefully, you make real substantive changes that do move you in the direction. But in talking to these folks that and I truly believe they want to be on the right side.
Right.
They're just it's not their lane, but they're telling me they're constantly feeling some bit of under attack, and you go, when does it stop? And I don't have an answer for that because to be honest, the John Wayne thing, I've seen a handful of John Wayne movies. I'm not impressed, but I don't care if his name's on the airport or not. I don't care whose name's on the airport.
Yeah, but I think the larger idea though is the reason why it really doesn't have a stop is because I think there's a really good analogy there, which is the going back to Barack Obama becoming the first black president. That was a symbol. That was a change of, okay, up until this point there have been 43 white male presidents, and now this is the first black man president. And so that's like changing a name on a post office. That's like changing a name on a box of cereal or a box of pancake syrup, like we talked about last week.
Right.
It's a complete mental paradigm shift in the entire society, and that's why, yes, a lot of things move forward, but unfortunately, as we've seen over the last 5 years, things also took some steps back. And that's why there's this backlash. There's this clawing back of rights. There's this wanting to go back to, no, this feels like we need to stop. It feels like we've gone too far. We had a black man. Well, we can't have a white woman next. And that's where the reset got hit,
Yeah, I think we could have had a white woman. I just don't think it could have been that white woman.
Well, I think that white woman won.
Oh, no,
right,
she did
by
win.
3 million votes.
No, she did win by 3 million votes. But as you pointed out, it still comes back down to the Electoral College that's set up for all the wrong reasons.
Exactly, right? And at the same time, though, your point, though, about that particular white woman and that particular election, that what people found a reason. I mean, we know not just certain people, we know how the demographics broke down.
Sure, no, we know it because there were 30 years of her baggage, and
exactly.
A lot of it came out of Bill. So she had some special things that no other candidate would have ever had to deal with. Most of it being her husband, and all of the stuff that went, and also 30 years of her just being just bashed publicly by right-wing rabid talk radio. That becomes a visceral thing with people.
And it becomes a visceral thing for the Democratic Party. I mean, I think that's what's important because it's not just Hillary Clinton. I mean, they're doing the exact same thing to Joe Biden.
Right.
And this man has been there for decades as well. And this is someone who the Republicans didn't even bother attacking, attacking all of these years until now all of a sudden, right, he became Barack Obama's vice president, and then now he's this person that they need to be, he's a punching bag. But that was like his whole claim to fame was that he could reach across the aisle and he was somebody that could, pal around with segregationists. I mean, that came up in the primary. So, and that was the reason why Barack Obama chose him again, because he was somebody who could get that appeal across the aisle and could get these white moderates and these voters that really have traditionally for decades had a hard time crossing over to the Democratic Party because when we start talking about the Big Tent issues, the things that actually apply to our multicultural coalition in the Democratic tent, it does alienate a lot of white moderates. It does alienate those voters, and that's why for over 55 years, that column has remained red,
right.
For the white voting majority. And so again, I think this moment, where Joe Biden is, a white man. So, again, there's not that Hillary juxtaposition where there's a woman that we're dealing with, where you're ultimately just dealing with two 70-something-year-old white men. Okay, so that is an even playing field.
Each accusing each other of being mentally diminished.
Exactly. So that's sort of an even playing field, if you buy into that, okay? But what sticks out, though, is this same issue that we keep going back to of the white supremacy, the constant racism, and this is apart from the, sheer incompetence and the treason and the, all of that, the corruption, etc. But just the way that he continues to fan the flames, not only in the middle of an economic downturn, but also in the middle of social unrest, and then also in the middle of a public health crisis, in the middle of a global pandemic that's getting worse. So that's what's on the table, and I think what could possibly work this year is for those people who are getting exasperated and don't necessarily want to hear all of the details and get into the muckety-muck of all of the issues and hear about everybody's grievances. At least if they could get themselves in a mindset of, I just need to vote. Something needs to change. We need to get back to stability, and can make a very straight-up choice between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, and which one appears to be making things egregiously worse every day by the hour, and somebody who you can recall not being that way.
Yeah, not being that way. In fact, I tweeted out the magazine cover of Der Spiegel today. They're the German, Time magazine.
Oh, I love that. I saw that.
With the title of "Fire Devil: A President Burns Down His Own Country." There's a drawing of him, sitting behind the Oval Office desk with a match as the country is burning through the window.
Yep.
And that to me is an apt image of where we are at this moment. And I think a lot of people want some stability.
Yeah. Yeah, people want stability, but it's ironic, right? Because a lot of what brought Trump about was this idea. I mean, this is what they were saying. We want to shake things up.
I don't know if they wanted to shake it up this much.
And what did they mean by that? I mean, even then, I think a lot of us were going, well, what do you mean by shake things up? Like, do you actually want a constitutional crisis? Do you want a border? Like, do you want a wall at the border? Do you really want a ban on Muslims? Do you want all of these things that he's been saying since he came down the escalator? Because he really did say all of those things.
Right. And to be honest, look, I don't care if he builds a wall or not. It doesn't mean anything. People are still going to come to this country in other ways. You build a 30-foot wall, I'll show you a 31-foot ladder, or somebody with a shovel, or, as we found out, a $100 reciprocating saw.
Well, I mean, wind is blowing that wall down. I mean, that wall is just not well done.
So build your wall. It's still not going to stop anything.
It's ridiculous.
You have to deal with the economic problems on the other side of the border. You have to figure out how to make people want to be able to stay home and support their families, because I don't think anybody wants to walk 1,000 miles to wash dishes or clean a hotel room.
Well, but again, we also have to talk about the demand side, because yes, there's the supply of workers coming from all over, but there's a demand. I mean, again, when are we going to get back to a discussion of the underbelly, which is the demand of the American people, largely white people. Again, I tell people this all the time. Before the pandemic, you go to any Home Depot in the state of Texas at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, and you look at the line of those white contractors in their trucks lining up for day laborers.
Yep.
How many of them even sometimes speak pretty good Spanish?
Look, which is why I've always said that every there should be no misclassification of workers as independent contractors, and everyone should join a union.
Well, but you know what? Those same truck drivers that are driving up to that Home Depot, they have a GWB sticker on their truck. They have a Trump sticker on their truck without the slightest hint of irony. Okay?
Yep.
They have the Mexican nanny, the Guatemalan nanny, the Venezuelan nanny taking care of their kids, coming in and cleaning their house. And they're so proud of it. And this is something that they get to flaunt around, that they have these people, quote unquote, that come and do X, Y, and Z for them. But they're still going around and voting against that very, workforce every single election.
Well, don't you think by bringing them out of the shadows, it raises the price, and they don't want to pay more. They're happy getting cheap labor.
And so that's the point, and that's why the system is going to continue to grind to a halt until everyday people who want to feel like they have no connection to this, and slavery was 155 years ago, and they didn't do slavery, and that was, their ancestors were on the right side, quote unquote. We are still all going into the grocery store. We're still buying this food, and we know good and well that it's not being picked by born and raised Native Americans. We know that.
Yeah. And look, I remember back when John McCain said he'd pay anyone $50 to go, $50 an hour to go pick lettuce. A lot of people applied for it. You didn't see a lot of people out there.
No, you're not going to. You are not going to. That is just fundamentally not what is going to happen, and it hasn't happened. So the idea that we can continue to have this cognitive dissonance and compartmentalize, our economic activity apart from our bigotry, we can't do that. I mean, the longer we continue to think we can do that, these people are still here. They still have children. They still have children who were born in America, who are still being educated in the American school system, who are still going to fight for this country in our armed forces, who are still going on to become doctors and nurses and essential people in our society. And we can't continue to act like that's not happening just because they are not, Anglo white Americans. That's just, that's something that I think as a society we are going to have that paradigm shift of the name change, of the identity change, that no, this is not a white man's country. It was never a white man's country. But it's got to be, I think that's why this is going to be such a painful process across all levels of our society, because this is a very hard-learned lesson that has just not been learned in this country. And I think it's going to take disaster after disaster until we finally get it.
Or if we ever get it, because, I got to tell you, I'm in the conversation that I've had, I'm not overly hopeful. Because the responses I've gotten from people are, how far, how bad does this get? Because the John Wayne thing came up, and I bring that up because evidently in one magazine article he said something pretty racist and stupid.
Yeah.
And it was, but you look at it, what is it, 50 years ago, and you go, what was the time 50 years ago that probably wasn't 50 years ago, out of the mainstream thought. How much of our history do you scrub because of how things were? I mean, Joe Biden was who Joe Biden was 40 years ago, but that was part of the time.
Yeah. But I mean, the time is going to change. The people are going to change. I think.
Yeah, I guess my question is there any forgiveness? Is there any way that you don't end up completely eviscerating, people's, all of these people's memories and their history, to try and put some other history in that place? Because I'm still trying to figure out where we're going. And look, I want to be on the right side like a lot of folks, but I'm not sure how this goes. So help me. I guess what I'm asking for is help.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why we have to look to the future. We have to always look to our children and look at how we are reflected in their eyes, and what our children see, what these millennials, what these Gen Z people see, is they're tired of this. And this is why they're out in the streets and they're relentless. And this is why they're doing the TikTok and they're trolling Trump and they're doing all these hilarious, innovative things with the internet, because they see a world that looks different than the world that we grew up in.
Yeah, I don't know. I grew up during the Reagan years.
Different classrooms. I mean, but I'm saying demographically, they are a different people than America was.
Right.
I mean, 30 years ago, we didn't have as many Latinos in this country. We didn't have as many Asians in this country. We didn't have as many Indian Americans in this country. And so, people are mixing. I mean, like I say all the time, my kids' class looks totally different than what my classes looked like when I was growing up. And so I think that the way they see us is that we still need to change. And the way our government, is there are a lot of 80-year-olds there. There are a lot of 70-year-olds. And, yes, they may have done great work, but their legacy will always be judged by the future. We all will be judged by the future. How we, screw this up or get it right, we're going to be judged by our kids. And I think that they are disappointed in and I'm disappointed in the generations that came before me for what was not done. I'm happy for what was done, but I very much hope that my kids come back and fix the things that we didn't get right and that we're not going to get right in our lifetime.
There you go. Excellent point.
Yeah.
Jane, as always, I appreciate the time and the thoughts and the conversation. Good stuff.
You too. Have a great week and be safe.
You as well. Our good friend Propane Jane. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Obviously not an issue going to go away anytime soon. Brutal. I'd love to hear it. Rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
We will prove that they knew as early as the 1950s that carbon dioxide from fossil fuels was dramatically heating up the environment.
Minnesota sues ExxonMobil for lying to the public about climate change.
The day after the tweets, Antitrust Division political leadership instructed staff to initiate an investigation that very day.
DOJ whistleblowers expose corrupt investigation into fuel-efficient car makers. Plus, chemical giant Bayer to pay billions to settle Monsanto weed killer lawsuits.
All of those killer lawsuits and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
These defendants had a duty. Worse than that, they had a duty to disclose in a way that was not misleading.
He said duty. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, so some big accountability news for a change this week in the Green News Report.
Yes, very remarkable. First up, chemical giant Bayer agreed in district court to pay up to $11 billion to settle more than 100,000 legal claims that its weed killer Roundup causes cancer. Bayer admitted no wrongdoing and maintains that the toxic herbicide is safe, but the World Health Organization labeled it a probable human carcinogen 5 years ago.
No wrongdoing, but they agreed to pay how much?
$11 billion.
Okay, just because they're nice.
Roundup is manufactured by Monsanto, now a Bayer subsidiary. Bayer also agreed to pay up to $400 million to settle cases from farmers alleging that its weed killer dicamba drifted onto their crops and killed them. But wait, there is even more. Bayer also said it will pay another $820 million to settle most claims for exposure to PCB, a highly carcinogenic chemical once manufactured by Monsanto that persists in U.S. waters decades later.
But again, no wrongdoing, I'm guessing.
Yeah. In other news, 2 Department of Justice whistleblowers testified to the House Judiciary Committee on Wednesday about unprecedented levels of political interference and corruption by U.S. Attorney General Bill Barr. Now, remember how last year 4 automakers entered into a voluntary agreement with California to abide by its more stringent tailpipe emissions rules?
I do.
DOJ employee John Elias testified that his unit was then ordered to launch an antitrust probe of those automakers despite no evidence.
After news reports indicating that the president was enraged by the arrangement and wanted to retaliate, President Trump criticized the deal on Twitter. The day after the tweets, Antitrust Division political leadership instructed staff to initiate an investigation that very day.
The investigation was quietly dropped a few months later, and the incident exposes how the corrupt Trump administration has tried to weaponize mechanisms of government to block action on climate change.
Hasn't tried, has succeeded. So once again, Donald Trump is using the DOJ as his own personal political weapon.
Yep, and this is just one that we know about.
We do now.
More accountability. Minnesota State Attorney General Keith Ellison announced this week that he is suing oil giant ExxonMobil for violating the state's consumer protection laws. Ellison alleges that Exxon, Koch Industries, and powerful oil industry lobby, the American Petroleum Institute, knew as early as the 1950s that burning their product caused dangerous man-made global warming, but chose to fund a 30-year disinformation campaign to mislead the public.
These defendants knowingly directed, conducted, and funded a campaign to deceive and defraud Minnesotans and Americans about the dominant role of fossil fuels in causing climate change in an effort to keep their profits flowing, no matter who it may harm.
Ellison's lawsuit includes claims for fraud, failure to warn, and separate violations of Minnesota statutes that prohibit consumer fraud, deceptive trade practices, and false statements in advertising.
We have seen similar suits like this in other states, I believe Massachusetts and New York, that have run into problems. Is there any reason to believe this suit won't run into similar problems in Minnesota?
This one is different. This one is under consumer protection, not climate liability for causing damages.
We'll see.
In North Carolina, a federal judge has ruled that parts of the state's ag-gag law violate the First Amendment. The law was passed by North Carolina's Republican-controlled legislature and sought to punish unauthorized disclosure of information about unethical conduct and violations of animal welfare laws on farms and in slaughterhouses, including to the news media. And finally, a federal appeals court has ordered the cancellation of a long-disputed oil and gas lease on land in the Badger II Medicine area in Montana. The land is considered sacred to Native American tribes in the U.S. and Canada. The ruling ends a 40-year-long fight by oil company Solonex to drill in the Blackfeet tribe's sacred lands.
You're right. Some good accountability news for a change in the Green News Report.
Yep.
Are you okay? For much more on all of those stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it looks like lobbyist Jack Abramoff possibly going back to prison at some point in the near future. I guess he pled guilty in a fraud case involving cryptocurrency. And look, you know, you give these guys credit. They've always got their hands in something. It just seems he's not very good at it. Or he was really good at it, but got really, really greedy. So when I saw this story, I'm going, I got to ask my good friend Bob Ney his thoughts. That's why I've got our good friend Bob Ney back on the line. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thank you, Rick.
So I'm
no,
sure
I haven't seen him. I haven't talked to him. I don't know anything about this.
So you're not involved.
You're right, for the record. That was the last one. I, of course, got in trouble with Abramoff when he had the whole scandal going down when he and Tom DeLay, did a few things here and there, and then he helped DeLay build all his political power base and money base. And I got wrapped up with Abramoff, and then, of course, I went to a federal institution not far from him. I was in Morgantown. He was in Cumberland, Maryland. But I tell you, Rick, I was shocked when I saw this. You would think, he would learn. And they had undercover FBI agents, from what I read. And then they said, well, you lobby, and then he didn't register. But it went beyond that, too. It wasn't just a matter of registering. Now, they went after other people for foreign registration. This was not registering domestically and lobbying. And then some fraud and some fake op-eds in a newspaper and on and on and on.
So, same old deal, just a different different issue.
Yeah, I guess he didn't learn, and, you learn from mistakes. Obviously, Jack didn't, and from what I see, he's going to, he's doing the plea deal and he's going to do some time. I think he's 62 now.
Yeah, I mean, he's not a young guy. And I'm like, at a certain age, you go, prison isn't the place for me.
Right. He went, because he's 4 years younger than me, and he went to prison in 2006. So he's been out, for probably, almost 10 years or so.
Yeah, well, I thought I saw that and I go, I got to ask Bob if any thoughts or if any kind of because for me I'd be going, good for him.
Yeah, I mean it's just I really was taken back. I knew he was involved in lobbying because I haven't seen Jack, but I knew he was because there was a couple articles about it. And when he got involved in the lobbying, I thought, why would you go and do that? Why on earth would you want to get back into that? And of course he did, and now this is where he's going to end up.
Now, is he barred from lobbying? Is that part of this?
Well, I would assume. Look, he lobbied. No, I'm sorry, he wasn't. He lobbied when he got out of prison. He eventually lobbied for some group or something. This one, he didn't report it.
Right.
So he was allowed, even though he went to prison for lobbying, irregularities and crimes, he, when he got back out, was still doing some. So, yeah, this wasn't a violation of, where you shouldn't lobby. This was a fact he didn't report it. And then they had fake op-eds that dealt with Kim Jong-un and Bitcoins. Jeez. And then they had fraud because they listed inaccuracies, so, whole deal there.
Anything to make a buck, I guess, huh?
Oh, yes, sure.
That's what it is.
He was I think he owed $28 million in fines from the first time, I believe, if I remember correctly.
28 million?
Yes. Oh, yes. He owed an outrageous amount of restitution.
Because the last thing I heard about him is he was delivering pizzas. He was opening like a pizza shop or something.
Well, what they do is when he got out of prison, he was working at a pizza shop. When I got out of prison, I went to work for Talk Media News, and I can remember my probation officer. I wrote about this in my book, Sideswipe, and he sat there and he's pointing his finger and he said, "You will not be on the radio." They were not wanting me because of John McCain. John McCain was running around the country saying, "I put Bob Ney in jail," and then I got out, and he sort of shut up about it. He was trying to look, clean,
right.
That he took care of the lobbyists, et cetera. So they tried to actually tell me I could not go on radio, and we were going to file a federal lawsuit, and eventually they just said, do what you want. So, but he got out of prison, and then you're kind of restricted where you're going to work. So he ended up in a friend's pizza shop, but that was just till he got off probation.
Yeah, see, that's the last I'd heard from him. And
Right.
I had thought that'd be the last you'd hear from him. He'd go on and, someone would give him a cushy job to stay, to hush up and go away, and that'd be it.
Yeah, because he knew a lot and on a lot of people.
Right.
And, a lot of people did not go to prison for their connections to Jack. And then he started giving speeches, I think $5,000 to $10,000 a clip around the country. He did that for a while.
See, that's what you should do. Go on the speaking tour.
Should. Well, I'm past my prime now, so I'm happy just being on your show.
There you go. Good stuff. So let's talk about the big stories. We've surpassed, what is it? 500,000 deaths now? Over, they're saying well over 10 million people infected. Globally, over 500,000 dead, and it's a new strain coming around the corner.
Right, and then every morning I look at the dashboard with coronavirus, and you're right, 500 some thousand worldwide, and then as of today there are 125,000 deaths in America. I remember when we were talking about getting to the 100,000 point. Well, there's 125,000 with 685,000 recovered. The testing is interesting. It's that they list the testing as 30 million. And I guess that must be accurate, but I'm surprised they even got to 30 million.
So out of 30 million tests, 10 million are positive? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. That's what they had. I'm sorry, they had total deaths of 125,000. They had 2.5 million people were infected, and 30 million were tested.
Oh, that's just for the U.S. then, okay? Because the CDC came out the other day and said that they actually believe it's 10 times higher than that. You know, they were claiming somewhere around 20 million people have it, and just probably a lot of people don't even know, which is the scary part of this, because the spike we're seeing throughout the South, to me, is extraordinarily worrisome, because I fear that we in states that went through what we went through have completely opened up by now, and we end up right back where we started from.
Well, yes, and Rick, there's something else here with the feds too, and this is what just drives you crazy. The CDC, when they were announcing the testing, they weren't distinguishing between a test that you have had the antibodies at one point in time or you are currently positive. So then, they don't know, well, this person needs quarantine. Well, are they actually actively, positive, or was that from before? And so this whole testing, I mean, the country really, never got into it. I mean, from the White House, just never did. Mark on it,
poor
because
leadership
the president's speech the other day.
Yeah, poor leadership and poor handling of this right from the start. But again, what do you expect? I also wanted to get your thoughts on this story about Russia, which I find extraordinarily disturbing. You buying any of this?
Well, there's a couple of things. Going straight to the issue, because I have followed, I've been in Afghanistan and Iraq, and I've followed the Mideast. As you know, I lived in Iran at one point in time during the revolution, and Saudi Arabia. So I've followed this from my capacity then in Congress and still now. And is Russia capable? That's the first issue. Is Russia capable of doing what? Yes. The answer is yes. They're capable of paying, and there were American deaths result of their paying money.
Yep, I don't doubt a bit of it.
Right. That's number one, because people are doubting that. Oh, well, they fought in Afghanistan. The Russians wouldn't do that. Yes, they would. So that's number one. And the second one is, as far as who knew what and when, I don't know that we ever will know, but I find it, even if the NSA or the CIA, the intel agencies, even if they thought it wasn't credible, when you would hear something like that, it would be reported to the White House. I can't imagine they say, well, okay, we'll make a judgment call here and not tell them.
Yeah. Do you buy any of the argument that the intelligence community wouldn't trust him with it? Because right when he took office, I was talking with people who were saying, well, the intelligence agencies, they're a little leery because he's loose lips kind of thing. So there's only so much they may give him. There was a fear that might be the reality, that they wouldn't tell him. You're saying there's no way they didn't tell him.
I think that they had to have been told. Now, I understand, though, that theory, because, he says things. And I know in Congress at one point in time, frankly, and I was actually in a meeting at one point in time where people were refusing to tell certain members of Congress certain information, classified information, because they thought they would leak it. So, it's not uncommon that there are individuals you say, I don't know if we should say that in front of them. And I've seen situations personally like that.
Yeah, Trump
and
being
in the
one
White
of them.
House. Yeah, I'm sorry, what's that?
Trump being one of them, in my view.
Wait, well, and I mean, that's very possible that they did that. But in this case, I would think, especially, think about this for a second, with the touchiness of the whole Trump, Russia from day one, the Ukraine, I mean, everything, you would think that they would tell him something like this because of, his relationship with Putin, and he was pushing for Putin to be included in this September.
Right. Now, the reporting that I've seen on it lately is he was told probably in March. It was part of presidential daily briefing. Now, I would argue that he probably doesn't read the presidential daily briefings. So if it was in there, maybe there's plausible deniability. I don't read, would be the argument. But the reporting on it is, he was made aware of it. And the other reporting I've seen is, they knew as far back as a little over a year ago.
Right. I mean, they're all quoting the March, time frame. But according to what you read, what he said, and they speak for Pence too, that neither one of them sort of knew until the article broke in the New York Times. Wall Street Journal. And I just find that incredibly hard to believe.
I find that impossible to believe that if you're targeting U.S. troops, especially since this is supposed to be the troop president, the guy who loves the troops the most, you would think that he would have responded. So are you surprised that we haven't heard a response yet or anything? Or is this something that you would even keep close to your vest if you were going to respond?
Well, I think that's what they're doing. I mean, how do you respond to this? If you were an intel agency, official, you would even directly to the president, you would say, look, we don't believe this, but you need to hear what we were, told, even though we don't believe it. I mean, you would at least tell that part of it. And so now the fact that it's just the answer is what's fake news, I didn't know, makes me think that maybe this story still has legs because somebody's going to talk to somebody who was in a room somewhere and heard something.
And maybe we'll have a hearing on it, and maybe we'll have enough hearings to compete with the Benghazi hearings.
Yeah, well, I don't know if that's possible. There was a lot of them.
There was a lot of them, to find out exactly what we knew from the start.
Right.
Sad stuff. But the campaign's coming 137 days.
Right.
Until the big election, and you've now got Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, the big battleground states, and Trump and Biden in both states. Any word on what's going on?
Yes, Marquette is interesting in Wisconsin. Of course, your home state of Pennsylvania, you'll know well, as I do, Ohio. And Ohio is, it depends on which section of Ohio you're in. Trump is slightly up or he's slightly down. Wisconsin, though, in February, they were dead even, Trump and Biden. Then it went 3 points for Biden, and that was around March. And today it's 9 points that he's up. I still think that, again, it's significant, and there's a lot of stories about, well, maybe Trump will drop out. No way. There's absolutely no way he's going to do that.
Nope.
And there's some time for the election yet. But if I were running the Trump campaign, I would be alarmed because of the numbers. And people, and here's another fake news. When the White House, the Trump campaign says, well, this is the same situation as Hillary last time. No, it's not. The numbers are different. It is not the same situation. And here's the alarming part for the Trump campaign: Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Ohio. Just those three states right there. Forget Michigan for a second. Those three states right there, what's going on. This was not the same with Hillary Clinton.
Yeah. And also, his only real talking point was that the economy was booming, not booming in those three states.
Right.
Finally, I wanted to get your thoughts on the Iranians evidently put forth an arrest warrant for Trump. Why?
Well, they do this. They're called fatwas, and they put on, they technically will put, a price on your head. They put out, they want somebody killed, just like they did the author that time, Rushdie. But on this case, they just are making a point that, he's, and from their point of view, a criminal. This is more or less for the clerical leaders in Iran to look good. Look, they've got the virus raging over there. They've got this brutal regime, so they're going to come out and say, "Okay, we want Trump arrested."
Need a distraction.
Yeah, sure, yeah. Because things are not good over there, and so it's going to be a distraction. And the Iranians, in general, do not like President Trump. So, whereas the Iranian people before. I lived in Iran. A lot of Iranians still like Americans, but with Trump's case, they don't like him. And of course, the clerics are trying to keep their power. So it's a good thing to say, well, let's arrest Trump.
Yeah. No, they focus their hatred on a foreign leader. Sure, I get that. As where our leader is focusing the hatred on people protesting in the streets for equal rights and equal treatment.
Right.
I get it.
And foreign, he will also, he's focused on, not that Iran's a picnic, I understand that, but he's also focused on certain things, with Iran and the Iran nuclear deal, which actually was containing nuclear buildup in Iran.
It was actually working.
Sure.
Bob, as always, good stuff. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rick.
Our good friend Bob Ney. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day that American folklorist Archie Green was born in Winnipeg, Canada. His father was a Ukrainian refugee who had fought in the 1905 Russian Revolution. As a young boy, his family moved to Los Angeles. There, he enjoyed listening to cowboy songs on the radio. Archie grew up to become a shipwright and a carpenter, but he never forgot those cowboy songs. At the age of 40, he returned to college at the University of Illinois to study labor history. He wanted to learn about the songs and the stories at the heart of the U.S. labor movement. He was interested in what he dubbed labor lore, the folklore of working people. For 7 years, Archie led the effort to get Congress to pass the American Folklife Preservation Act. Finally, in 1976, Congress unanimously supported the act. The act allowed for the founding of the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress. The center helps to collect the stories of the working class. Archie wrote books and essays about workers, including miners, tinsmiths, millwrights, and the Sailors Union of the Pacific. In 2007, he helped to edit the Big Red Songbook. The book includes the lyrics of nearly 200 labor songs. These songs had been included in various editions of the Little Red Songbooks published by the Industrial Workers of the World between 1909 and 1973. Archie Green understood that workers' stories deserved to be remembered and told. He spent 5 decades as a scholar and advocate for these stories. His work has helped to preserve the record of working class life in America for generations to come.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Donald Trump is suing the state of Pennsylvania. Him and a couple of congressmen from Pennsylvania, of course. You've got Glenn Thompson, Mike Kelly, John Joyce, and Guy Rathenshaler, and 2 Republican voters who want to serve as poll watchers in November, whoever the hell they are. So you're probably just, people who want to be somebody have signed on to suing the state of Pennsylvania, all 67 counties, and I love the argument that the Trumpers are making. Here's the official bit. Defendants have sacrificed the sanctity of our in-person voting at the altar of unmonitored mail-in voting and have exponentially enhanced the threat that fraudulent or otherwise ineligible ballots will be cast and counted in the forthcoming general election. Never mind the invisible box voting machines. They also argue that since the state is set up weird, that the mail-in ballots violate the state and federal election law, which I don't think there is any real federal election law. They argue that the state and how things are set up, where in Pennsylvania, where you have 67 different counties who do things 67 different ways, creates a patchwork system that violates the constitutional protections given to people for equal protection under the law. Now, I do remember them saying the reason that we have so many different kind of voting machines is that we would have a whole bunch of different systems that would be very different to hack. So it was working well, the patchwork system that we have, for their other argument. This one, not so much. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of vote by mail. I still prefer to show up and vote myself personally. But I think we should have every opportunity to cast our ballot, however that be. And with the right safeguards in place, I believe vote by mail is perfectly safe. So there you go. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com is where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go, wherever you go. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.